Hello and welcome to Fae The Source from young Scot. I'm Duncan, and in this series we talk to experts about important topics, taking a closer look at the issues that really matter. The first topic we're going to explore is what it means to be a young man in Scotland today. We'll be talking openly about masculinity, the good, the bad and everything in between. This is a safe space for honest conversation, and today we're joined by Jimmy Paul. Would you mind telling us a little bit about who you are and what exactly it is that you do?
Of course. So my name's Jimmy Paul and I head up the Scottish Violence Reduction Unit, the VRU as we're also known. We're a centre for expertise in violence in Scotland, and our goal is a Scotland that is free of violence. We believe that's entirely possible. We work on the basis that violence is preventable, not inevitable. Mm-hmm. And a big part of that, and a big part of why I'm here to have this discussion today, is our belief that the traditional notions of masculinity are quite unhelpful.
Yeah. From learning about exactly what it is you've done and where you've come from, you've had a very powerful journey. Can you talk us through the journey that led up to leading the VRU, and how do you think personal experiences shaped your understanding of what it actually means to be a man?
Thank you. That's very kind of you. So look, I'll give you a CV introduction first of all. I came up to Scotland to study when I was 18, which was nearly half my life ago now, showing my age. It's frightening, really. And I studied human geography. I loved it. It was about people and how people use spaces. I learned lots about that that's relevant to jobs that would follow. Mm-hmm. I then worked in horrible jobs for a year, and I'll tell you more about that in a moment, banks or, places where you didn't really feel valued. And then I got onto the NHS management training scheme, which I see as a real fast track in my career to leadership, real roles of influence. And I was treated so well on that scheme and really invested in. So I worked in the health service for a while. I then moved to looked after the Centre for Excellence for Looked After Children in Scotland, also known as CELSIS. And I was there for 4 years. In the middle of my 2 years there, I was blessed. I was really lucky to be one of the co-chairs of the Independent Care Review, which was a root and branch review of Scotland's care system. We helped to write the conclusions that informed the Promise, which you may have heard of in Scotland. I then headed up a charity called the Wellbeing Economy Alliance for a few years before then moving to this role where I head up the Violence Reduction Unit. So look, my career's bounced around all over the place. It's health, it's looked after, it's charities, but the one thread that runs through it all is how do we make the world a fairer, more just place for everyone, for kids, but for everyone. And, I gave you my CV introduction. A personal introduction now is I grew up around violence when I was younger. I was in the care system from the age of 11, whether it's in the home or in the care system as well, or in the community that I grew up in. Violence was the norm. And, I've come to learn over my career and in my personal experiences as well, communities should be informing and driving change always if we're to truly keep our finger on the pulse. So that's a big driver for me in everything that I do. And I guess, my own personal experiences fuel that as well, that belief. But I've seen it in action, and I think we need to do much more of it.
I like that. That's a very good, well-informed and in-depth introduction for yourself, both on both sides, which is really good. You've touched a little bit about your thoughts for solutions on things, and I've done a lot of speaking today, and that's kind of crept up in terms of community as a real power for change. Now, within that involves working with other people, speaking out, but as a big part of people's view on masculinity, men often associate staying quiet and silent about their struggles. Have you seen the idea play out among communities that you've been involved with, and how can we shift that narrative to change?
I see it every day. My team that I work with see this every day. The view that, traditional notions of masculinity, be quiet, be stoic, don't express yourself. That's how you stay safe. That's how you get by. That's how generations have done it before. Mm-hmm. But, generations before, we also had corporal punishment, the death penalty. Yeah. Generations before, we had people that didn't wear seatbelts in cars, and now we do. We can rewrite a new normal, and we should rewrite a new normal when it comes to notions of masculinity, because far too often, whether it's bottling things up, whether it's hit first before you get hit, or tool up because, you might not be safe on the street tonight, whatever it might be, these things are not helpful, and we can rewrite this. But, to answer your question again, I see it all the time, and I see that as a key driver of violence. Violence is largely a man's issue, a boy's issue, and we've got a lot of work to do to unravel that and forge a new path.
Absolutely. Now, your work at the VRU, you focus a lot on tackling violence at its roots, at the very beginning, at the source of it all, whatever that might be. How much of that violence, in your view, is tied to harmful views of actual masculinity, and how can we actually begin to change that? What processes can we put in place, and how do we tackle that issue?
It's hard to quantify how much of it links back to that. There are other factors as well. If you grow up in harsh poverty, if you're in and out of the care system, if you've grown up in a family where addiction is the norm, if you don't have good role models or youth work or safe spaces or a good relationship, all of these things feed into this. But all of those also have perpetuated this systemic understanding, if you like, that then filters down of what it means to grow up as a man in Scotland. What is Scottish masculinity? And it's those things I mentioned earlier. It is, hit first before you get hit, or protect your girl, or whatever it might be. Violence is fun. You seek approval from peers that are involved in these unhealthy ways of being. And now I say this with a caveat. Those behaviours are unacceptable. And I'll always say that. But we, as Scotland, those of us running services, those of us in charge of where funding goes, or whatever it might be, we've got a role to play to help forge a new path, to create opportunities for young people, to help build a way out of this. And a big part of what I think, and I have a feeling you'll ask me about this later, kind of my leadership and what it means to embody positive, healthy masculinity and leadership. But one big part of that is seeding and sharing power with communities.
Okay.
Too often the typical masculine patriarchal model of power is held at the top for those in positions of influence. And what I do every single day, to the effect that one of your other guests is part of an advisory board that we have of those with lived experiences of these issues. That's the first time the VRU's ever had that, and we've done some fantastic work in the past. What can we do structurally to seed and share power with those who have lived experience, so that they guide us in everything we do, and that therefore we become better and we move towards, again, healthier ways of being? So some of this is, yes, we've all got an individual role to play, we've all got individual responsibility, but my focus is often, what can we do to improve the choice architecture of boys and men today?
Now, I like the way that you've pitched that, because there's a lot of really important information out there. In terms of some of the wording you've chosen to use within the kind of explanation of what support or what the source and the problem is, if we have young people tuning into this and wanting to listen in and take away value from this, but maybe pitched at their age and their understanding, is there anything you might be able to say to them to reassure them that the process isn't solid and there is a positive outcome of this, and that no matter what stage you are within this process that you've talked about with violence and how that affects people's view of masculinity, what can we say to those young people tuning in and listening to you right now?
A few different things. The first is, whether it's the first time or 601st time, it is never too late to choose a different path, be it involvement in violence or anything else. So I would always encourage you to think, what is it? What is that decision you are making, and how are you going to stick to that decision? You've got to find support. I often talk about, in my experience growing up, I wasn't involved in violence as a youngster myself, but I had a lot of help from teachers, brilliant teachers. And I didn't have to take up their offers of support, but I did, because they were good examples to me. It was helpful support at a time when I really benefited from it. So who are the people around you that are offering support, the good role models, the good people that can set an example and help build your path into whatever it is you want to do? I also think the world's a better place when we're all authentically ourselves. The warmest people I've ever met are those that are so comfortable in their own skin and who they are, that they invite others to be the same. And I would encourage everyone, whether it's leaving a life of violence, or whether it's who you are, or is showing your emotions as a boy or as a man. It's so much better, and it's so much more freeing and enabling for others, even if you feel self-conscious doing so. So a few different things there, but and also, help is available. If you need help, there are charities out there. There are great organisations that you can contact. It looks different depending on where you live locally, so you've got to do a bit of research. And the very last thing I'll say is, don't let anyone ever tell you you cannot achieve your dreams. And that does relate to masculinity and being a boy. You've got so few boys in certain industries. There's a writer called Richard Reeves, who's a fantastic writer on the issue of boys, men, masculinity. Worth looking up his book called Of Boys and Men. And he says, there are far far too little men in what he calls heal industries.
Okay.
So health, education, administration and literature, I think it is. And, we often talk about girls entering STEM, and there's lots of funding, and as there should be, to fix that wrong. But we also need to focus on boys and men in those places and those roles, because boys and men obviously care about those roles. And also because we've got to have, it's hard to be what you can't see, isn't it? It's hard to do that. So it's not impossible, but it's hard to do so. And so we need to make sure that we're setting role models all over the place. That's
very well put. I appreciate you bringing the kind of level of understanding down to, and breaking it down a little bit for those that might want to be able to listen in. Now, I'm going to play devil's advocate for a minute, because I heard you talking a lot about turning to people like teachers and turning to charities. Now, some people could argue that people with an obscure vision of masculinity might view that as not possible, because it shows weakness and it shows vulnerability, and especially in a setting like school, where the people around you, that could be something that provokes bad behavior towards you, and people might, it's something that could bring upon scary situations with groups and friends. So how do we encourage young people that are in a position like that turning to and speaking to people like teachers and charities is a behavior of strength and something that it should be viewed positively and responded to positively by other people, rather than within the moment of toxic masculinity or the obscured masculinity looked bad upon?
What a great question. I see, and I think healthy versions of masculinity see vulnerability as strength. You might have seen it's a meme of 10 matches in a row, and one is pulled away, and the first match is lit, and all of those that are next to each other are a bit like passing it down from generation to generation or community to community. But the one that stepped away stops it being transmitted to others. That reminds me it is possible. And I guess, in my life, I've had to do that quite a lot as well. It is possible to step away from what you've been shown, what you've learned, what you've been taught, into healthier behaviours and set up a different life for yourself and others as well. I know it can be scary. I know it can. I've been there myself.
Yeah,
but
it definitely can be.
Find the right people, open up to them. And I know that's easier said than done. Tell them to keep it confidential if you need to. This doesn't have to be broadcast to the world. And the caveat to what I said earlier, I said vulnerability, I see it as strength. Sometimes it can be overplayed. Sometimes people get to a point where, you want to share your story with the world, or, and I've seen so many people do that and really struggle with that as well. You've got to keep yourself safe in all that you're doing. So yes, open up to good people around you, but just remember your story and your experience and your views are yours. You don't have to share them with the world.
Yeah. I like that. Thank you very much for answering, because I know that was a little bit out of the blue, but I wanted to see your response to that, because I think it's very important, and young people will definitely be able to relate to that in that situation. Now, coming back to yourself, looking at what you do in your leadership roles that you currently take and experience, how do you model positive masculinity, showing strength, but also empathy, openness, and care? How do you do that?
That's a good question, because let me start by saying this. I've got a coach, or I had a coach who was coaching me last year, and she said, go and do this task. Go and ask 10 people to give you 3 words that they would use to describe you. Okay. It doesn't need to be anonymous, anything like that. So some of the words were driven, determined, empathic, caring, courageous, committed, kind, warm. So I guess to answer your question, you've got to actually be those things as a human at your core. And I think that's what I am, and that's what I've become. In order to become those things, you've got to work at yourself. You've got to reflect a lot. Are my decisions the right one? Has how I've gone about it been the right way? That means rupture and repair. So if you get things wrong, say sorry, admit it, move forward better. If you get things right, well, sometimes someone doesn't understand it, even if it's a decision you've made, but it's the right thing. You know it, you believe it to be, and just stay in relationship with those individuals,
Okay, good.
So those things are easier said than done, but they're overlooked, I think, in leadership positions. And often there's a view that you can dispense of those difficult conversations to others around you, people who work to you, for example, or report to you. I never shy away from those things, I mentioned earlier seeding and sharing power, not only how you carry yourself as an individual, but the decisions you make and how you build the structures around you, I think is also essential to a more healthy version of, leadership, workplace masculinity, all of these
Yeah.
things. So, setting up the advisory board for those with lived experience, in each of our projects, each of our pieces of work, I often say to those who are leading that piece of work, what do your community say about the work you're doing? What are they saying about the progress or lack of? And how can we really, really advance this work with them at the heart? And for me, the proof is in the pudding. If those communities tell us, well, this is working, then that's a great thing, rather than if we're appeasing perhaps solely our funder, but annoying communities. So,
of course.
Yeah.
I think, again, thank you for putting that out so in depth, because there's really good bits of value there where you talk about it's almost practicing what you preach. And if you're talking a lot about positive masculinity, you need to embody that. But also a really important part of reflection that you brought up there, and you're almost vetoing and verifying what it is that you're doing. It's very easy for me to say, I'm practicing what I preach because I say I should be doing this, and that's exactly how I do it. But actually taking the step, and again, becoming vulnerable, asking other people what they actually see from you, and getting that back to then check that I am practicing what I'm preaching. And like you said, if you get it back, it's brilliant. You know that you're doing exactly what you are. And if you don't, then like you said, rupture and repair. It's a matter of process. It's a process of, it's not a simple one step solve, is it? But again, I think that's really important that you brought reflection into something to do with positive masculinity, because that brings a sense of direction to, it's not just you achieve this magical thing called positive masculinity, you hit it, but it's a process of constantly development, personal development, and verification of that. So that's really well done. Now, it's lovely to speak about yourself, but if we wrap back to the young people that we might be speaking to today, you've spoken really well about what you might say to them if they were in a position that we've mentioned before, and what advice you might give to them. But if they were struggling with the expectations of masculinity, whether it be in school or whatever stage they might be in, and if they're looking for a positive role model, but they don't necessarily have a teacher or a charity that they know of that they can go to, where can they find the support for that, or where can they find these positive role models exactly?
Well, I'll start by saying when I was younger, I'm not religious anymore, but I used to go to a church, and I found some incredible role models at that church. Boys, men who are a little bit older than I, a few years older, but they set an example that was very different to what I saw at school, for example, or in the community. And, that was a little bit different to what others would do. Others would find their role models. So it was really helpful for me to do that in a way. And I found them because I was volunteering at that church, leading groups with young people. So I think actually I would say, in order to find good people and the people you want as role models, find out what you're passionate about and go and immerse yourself in that world. Is it young people and sports? Is it art? Is it something creative or poetry? In our world today, online world, it's that little bit easier to search out these people and to research them and possibly even get in touch with them. So part of that is around hobbies and pastimes. Go and surround yourself in those things, because you will find like-minded people, and no doubt people that embody that positive version of masculinity that we need to see more of in Scotland. But also then really, cling to them, make sure that, they're there to support you. But there are also charities who have support all over Scotland, be it your Barnardos or your Childline or your MCR Pathways with their mentors, and many, many more. But certainly in this online world as well, it's not just individuals in front of you. Well, I always say relationships are actionable, and that might flow from that. But also, what podcasts can you listen to? What other, YouTube series can you watch? What can you see on TED talks or whatever it might be? Absolutely. So there's so much out there available to you, but it starts with curiosity. Absolutely. Being relentlessly curious and really following what you're interested in and not giving up, but also that reflection piece again. And thank you for your summary on that. I agree. That's a big part of who I am. Sometimes, often, I over-reflect. After most meetings, after most days, I go home and my head is spinning. I wish I could stop that a little bit, but many other people say I don't do enough of that. So how do I ramp it up a bit? Find your level that's healthy enough for you to keep you constantly reflecting, constantly thinking about how you can improve and be better, and make sure you got that humility that goes with it as well. So yes, a bit about pastimes, a bit about relationships, a bit about your own research as well. Amazing. Again, tying into the curiosity, because of if somebody's curious and they're going out to look into things, a lot of what they come across will be new. How can
and this might be difficult to answer, but how can a young person verify or know that the person that they are trying to identify as a positive role model is a positive role model, especially for something like masculinity?
Very good question. I mean, it's really difficult because I think today we've got lots of opportunists using, for example, social media to push a very different, a very opposite message. I guess, look, what I would say is, what are good Scottish values? What are your values as a human? You know, is it kindness? Is it empathy? Is it warmth? Is it inclusion? Is it curiosity, reflection, understanding? All of these things. And does what the person in front of you are portraying, does it portray those things, or does it portray division, hatred, violence, anger? Look for the former. Look for the former is what I would say. But I also appreciate how hard it is, how quickly this world is developing. But keep doing your research and don't take what you see at face value.
Amazing. I think that's a good way of putting it, because you're almost playing matchmaker with the things that you value and then matching it with the people that you might come across to then see if they are a match for what you're effectively trying to embody. I think young people, we all know ourselves, young people are very, very impressionable. And I think that's the slight, with curiosity is good because you're going out to try and find things, but there is an alarm that, anybody could be impressionable. And I'm sure you've seen yourself, I've seen people that have been impressioned by the wrong people, and it is a little bit scary, but there is a way that young people can be impressioned by the right people. And when we're speaking about this right now, it's important to really relay that message that it totally is possible to come across the right people and get yourself on the right track. You agree?
Absolutely, 100%. I mean, I believe that. I've seen it time and time again. Every day I meet someone who has done that, has turned their life around despite a difficult start, despite serious adversity in their childhoods. But, it is a work in progress. And you said this earlier about reflection. You said this earlier about positive masculinity. You never just get there and achieve it. You have to keep working at it and reflect every single day and bring that forward into the rest of your life. So, yes, I do agree. And I think we need to move forward in that belief and with that hope. Without that, what's the point? I can never believe that.
I like that. Looking back to yourself and your younger years, if you could change anything about how you saw masculinity when you were younger, whichever stage it might be that you choose, what would it be that you would change?
Oh, that's a good question. You spoke about being impressionable there. I was extremely impressionable because I had so many different, or should I say a lack of, role models growing up for many years. What would I change? I think I would change the idea that expressing your emotions is weakness.
I like that.
I think being the eldest boy of 3 that were in care together, I think that played a part. I think growing up in a care system and in families where expressing your emotions was not good, especially if you were a man, so actually just being much more free and open to that and authentic with it as well. That was a huge thing. I did also have a bit of a belief that violence was masculine. Now, I didn't ever get involved in violence when I was younger, but I kind of admired others that may have done.
Okay.
And that led me to respect them more than really I would now, for example, So those two things.
Again, and that ties into how impressionable some young people might be. Do you think there's a consistent source linking violence into, skewed visions of masculinity through violence and what that plays a part in impressioning young people?
Do I think there's a consistent source?
As in the beginning, the start of where young people start developing these beliefs. Where might it come from?
I think they've been held for centuries in Scotland, across the Western world. And I think they've been perpetuated and changed and adapted for different contexts. I think now we are waking up in Scotland to the fact that there is a different way that is possible.
Yeah.
I think we're also waking up to the fact that, in the past and currently, the systems that we've got, patriarchal systems of working, have disadvantaged women and girls. Women and girls have caught up in many arenas and are overtaking boys and men in certain arenas. And, we've also need to build some tailored plans and support for boys and men. And that involves a redefining of what it means to grow up as a man in Scotland today. Okay. So I think these things are centuries and centuries held and perpetuated, but, be it through tradition, be it through religion, be it through customs and ways of doing things, be it through, perceptions on what it means to grow up as a man, but also, yeah, we're growing up in a time where the job market's changing as well. Lots of the jobs that, the people my father's era and grandfather's era would have done, the manual stuff, typically reserved for men, doesn't exist anymore. So I also think we've got a bit of a crisis of masculinity. And that's why we're seeing some of these opportunists take advantage of that with impressionable young men and boys. And that's why we've got to provide a healthy alternative.
It's interesting hearing the almost irony of talking about positive masculinity being something to do with reflection and change. However, when you're talking about the source of the problems for skewed masculinity, it's something that is many, many, many years old and hasn't changed. It's an interesting link to make to those two topics. But again, really interesting to hear everything that you've mentioned so far. It's really good to identify vulnerability, reflection, and speaking out about your feelings as a real strength and an item of going towards and finding positive role models to speak to as a solution to really developing your masculinity to a place of positive. And I like that a lot. I could speak to you and I could listen to you for many, many more hours, but I think it is time to wrap things up and just say thank you very much for watching Fae The Source. If today's chat got you thinking, or you're looking for advice and support, head to young.scot/I feel for more resources. That's young.scot/AYE feel, because we're Scottish after all. You can always follow the link down in the description, which will be somewhere down here. And if you want to continue the conversation, please hit subscribe and join us next time. Until then, take care of yourself, those around you, and from us, it is thank you very much and goodbye.